Hey everybody, welcome back to class 7 of mdo204, and in this class we're going to cover the Virgin Galactic spaceship model. We're going to go through and look at it and fine-tune it just a little bit more for our needs and what we might want to do with it. So although this model was provided to us, we're going to fine-tune it to use inside of Modo for our purposes, and that'll just be double-checking all of the UVs, cleaning up the geometry, making sure things are in nice, neat folders. So when we move the spaceship, everything else will move with it accordingly. And then going through and fine-tuning the materials on all the different parts and pieces. Then we'll go into the schematic view where we'll use a few of the nodes to drive the animation. We're going to do this in a cool way that's going to be automatic, so we'll get some rocking on the yaw and pitch of the ship, and we won't have to hand animate it at all, and it'll be a really cool, easy way to dial up or dial down how much turbulence we want in the animation. But before we do that, I want to jump back to Earth and run through a different way that you can set up the city light textures. This was based on a question asked in the forums. And I want to show you how I set up mine, and I want to show you an alternate way that you can set it up that might help you if you don't use my method. Since there are so many different ways to achieve the same goal, I'm just going to show you a new way that probably will help you guys. Let's jump right into Modo and I can show you what I'm talking about. Alright, so here we are way back in class 2 with the Earth rig that I created in Modo. So the question was, how do we take the city lights at night and be able to change the color of the lights on the actual city lights? Something was breaking and not working for you guys when you did this. And that's because on the actual texture itself, Night Earth here, that I created for this, I actually went in and changed the color of the lights on the map myself from white to this orange color. So if I wanted to update it using my method, I would have to go back in and change this map. This gives it an advantage and a disadvantage in that you have to change the color every time, but if you use this method, you can then paint on top of this or change some of the areas, change some of the colors and areas of the lights themselves, so it becomes more of a matte painting. So if I go to my schematic view, you can see that here is that image map, and it's set to luminous color. And from my illuminate node, I'm coming luminance out into a math operation so I can control the fall off, into the color invert, into another math operation which helps, which can give me a little bit more control here, and then we're coming into luminous intensity. So, if we look at our material and come over to our material transmissive tab, we can see luminous intensity has this little indicator here showing us that this channel is linked. Luminous color is not, but if we change the luminous color here, nothing actually physically happens to our image map at all. So one of the things that you guys were experiencing is if you change this to luminance amount, and then under material, you could now change the luminance color, but it wasn't mapping to the city lights. So the question then becomes, how do we get it to do that? And obviously this is a completely bad result and it's not what we want. So let me show you a different method of doing this, and it'll be pretty straightforward and easy. Alright, to show you how this works, I'm just going to create a new sphere. And I don't need this to be on tessellation. I'm just set that back to globe. Zero it out. So with this selected, I'm going to give it a material and call it night lights. And then I'm going to just hit A to frame this up, and I'm going to click on my images and add image or load image. Navigate to my texture and read it in. And I can just pull this on top of my image here. And one other thing I might want to do is just make sure I turn off global illumination. And I'm just going to turn off my environment so it's not seen to camera. And also for this, I'm just going to turn the specular down to 0 so we see nothing but the lights here. So here we have our map. And I'm going to set this now. Set this to luminance amount. And then one other thing I want to do. So after I set this to luminance amount, the other thing I want to do is I want to come over to my diffuse color just so I can see what's happening here. So now we can see that this night earth image map is set to luminance amount, and under material I can now change the color of my actual luminance coming off of this map. So how do we just get it to be on one side or facing the sun? Well, this is pretty easy too. I'm going to come to add layer, processing gradient. And I'm actually going to pull this beneath the earth map, city light map, and then change this to layer mask. And on input parameter, I'm going to change this to sample parameter distance to locator. And then middle click in value. And then just drag this value down. So now if we were to come over to 3D view here, I can select that texture locator and pull it off to the side. So now we can see that it's showing up very bright on one side and hardly anything on the other. The only reason why it is showing up a little bit there is we're going to want to come back in under the gradient and just click on edit gradient. Right now it's easing in and easing out, so we can just make this a linear move. And then what I'm going to do, just to help you understand what's happening here, it's fading from complete on to complete off, but obviously we want it to fall off in the middle there. So I can just add a few more keyframes, pull this one down somewhere around there, and it's just so we can see this better. I'm going to put some color back in on our diffuse color. So now we can see we have the fall off happening here, and we can come back to this gradient and select these keyframes and adjust. I'm just going to click edit gradient so it's easier to work with these. So now we can adjust these as necessary. So if we look at this over here, that works pretty darn well. So that's just another way that you could control this layer, and what you're going to want to do is make sure you put your layer mask below night earth, below your city lights image map, and just use it to mask off. And when you set this to luminance amount, that map will just basically drive where the luminance is happening, and then you can simply come back into your material and drive what color the actual luminance color is going to be. So this is live, and I can update this to any color I want. So that's just an alternative way of working if the other way is giving you trouble and you don't want to keep changing the image map color. So let's take a look at our Virgin Galactic ship. Alright, so here is our production ready Virgin Galactic spaceship. And as much as I'd love to run you guys through modeling and texturing this, it can be a very intense process. So if you're new to Modo, there's tons of materials out there, including FXPHD tutorials that will run you through different kinds of modeling methods and how to create and UV some pretty cool stuff. So I just want to run you through this setup inside of Modo and what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. So here we have one big folder called VG Ship. So I can double click this ship folder here and move everything together, which is nice. If I open this up, I can see that it's made up of different mesh items. So if I start pulling and pushing some of these around, we can see I have my wings up here attached to the two outer bodies. I'll just undo that, and I have my windows here. So I can select both of these, which now I can branch this off. Let's say the middle decouples upon re-entry. And then I have my middle cylinder, which has the middle wings here, which I can use to fold up upon re-entry. It also has an afterburner, which I've set up as its own mesh item layer. So basically we can generate particles and things from this, so we can get fire and smoke or whatever we need coming from an afterburner. And then of course, pretty hard to see, if I zoom in here, you'll see that on the edge of the plane I have these two little discs that I set up as emitters, and this will come in handy in a later class when we talk about emitting volumes and stuff like that from the actual ship itself. So on the shading home front, if we come over here, and I'll just jump into the render tab so it's easier to see. So I have everything packaged up underneath this folder called Ship Shaders. So if I twirl this down, you can see there's left plane, right plane, middle plane, and windows. So if we look at left plane, toggle this on and off, we can see that everything is gone from this side. And actually we might want to relabel this right plane, left plane, depending on how you are viewing it. I guess it really doesn't matter. Kind of arbitrary. Just as long as you have the right textures on the right side. And left plane and right plane are made up of all of these textures here. So under material, we've set up our material to be what we need it to be. And then we have some image maps driving different variables on this material. And also within these folders, there's a shader item here, which will allow us to control everything about this shader here on just this area that we have selected. So that's left plane, right plane, middle plane, exactly what it sounds, same thing. It's just a set of image maps and a material. And then for windows, if I turn this off, this is actually all of the windows in the scene. And obviously you've guessed it, this is controlling the transparency and reflection of these actual windows itself. So I've put these all into one folder, and they're all in their respective, and they're all in the subfolders that they belong to, so it's nice and neat. Same with the Virgin Galactic ship. And let me just jump back to Model tab and run you through some best practices for this. You're absolutely going to want to make sure that you don't start moving stuff around and things can very easily get off track here. And that's why I put this in this Virgin Galactic ship, because you can just double click and make sure that you're moving everything together. Also with the selected, in item mode, you can select these single items here, and everything that is within those items will stick with it. So I can just mouse over the middle area and click and pull those specific things out. If I turn wireframe back on, that's a easier way to see what is physically selected, so I can see exactly what I'm grabbing. So it's important to note as well that the hierarchy here, if we were to select just these wings back here and move this around, we could. If we were to shift click on the body and the wings, we're now moving these in a way that doesn't stick together, and that's because what we only want to do is just select the body here, which is the middle cylinder, and now everything else goes with it. So we have a lot of flexibility with how we move this as an entirety, and we can animate just the folder VG ship. And if we animate this folder, and within this folder we want these wings to fold up, we could easily do that and fold the wings up. Obviously I'd have to set the correct center point on these for them to operate and spin. But you guys get the idea. So we can animate a hierarchy here. So animate the entire thing moving as the whole folder is concerned. So obviously we animate the whole folder, and then we can animate other things and they'll carry through within the hierarchy of animation. So let's take a look at how we might actually use this to animate this object. So in Setup tab, we are looking through Camera 1, and we can just spin this around to a way that we want to view our animation. Alright, I think that'll be good for me to see what's going on. So I can simply click on my folder here and drag and drop it into our schematic view. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click on X rotation, add channel to schematic, and on the Z rotation, and add this to schematic as well. So if we twirl this down, we can see we have the X and Z in this schematic view now. So to get this moving, I'm going to come over to Add, Channel, Channel Noise. And this is basically going to create noise values that we can use to drive our animation. So I'm going to, on the X, plug this in. And on the output, I'm going to just simply pipe this back into the X over here. So if I scrub through this, we can see a little bit of rocking happening here. I'm just going to boost the amplitude to 5, and if I hit play, we can see now that we're getting some rocking happening here. And maybe on offset, I'm going to set this to -2.5. Which basically is going to make it spin from the middle center of 0. Alright, so you've guessed it. We're just going to do the same thing to the other rotation channel here. Channel modifier, channel noise. Plug that in. And create the loop right here. So with this channel noise selected, we can start to dial this in. I'm going to just set this to 2, -1, and this will be the back and forth animation here. And we could turn up the frequency here. Let's try 6. And I'm going to push this just so we can see it a lot better. Turn the frequency to 12. So maybe this is a lot of turbulence. Obviously for this project we're probably not going to push it this much. So you guys kind of can start to understand now how we can use this to drive animation. We could easily add the Y channel if we wanted it to turn a little bit on that axis as well. And it's a really cool way to set up stuff and just, without setting down any keyframes, get the ship to rock on its own like it's going through wind or turbulence here as it enters or exits the atmosphere. Anyway, pretty simple setup. One other thing I want to show you, and I just realized this animation is quite long from a previous setup that I had. I'm just going to come over to my main project right here and set this to 120 frames. And now we can see the animation happening. So if I, in my animate tab in this window here, I can right click and record OpenGL to movie or image sequence. So I'm just going to do movie. Navigate to where I'm going to save this out. Call this mdo204 VG ship anim VO1. So I click save, and you can see what it's doing now is frame by frame is recording this to an OpenGL movie, and we're done, and it automatically opens it for us. I use VLC as my default player, and we can see what's happening now. So this is a really cool way to kind of get your animation dailies out the door and for people to see. And for you yourself to see the animation before it actually is, before you spend the time to render it, only to find out that it just doesn't feel right, or it's not rocking fast enough, or something of the sort. And we could easily change this to advanced OpenGL. And then perhaps we want to turn the wireframe off. I'm just hitting Control-1, turn off our work grid, and then make another one. And we'll do underscore clean. Save that out. And now what it's rendering now will be the same thing. It'll just be a different view with the OpenGL without the wireframes. Could be easier to see. So that's just another way of doing it, and I'll provide these guys for you. But feel free to set up some animations, play around with the model. Feel free to add any of those channels to your schematic and play around with using the different channel options to drive animations on those channels. It's a very powerful way to work. So I hope you guys had fun. If you have any questions, please ask them in the forums. I'd love to see any renders that you guys spit out, but I'd also love to see some of your animation whips using this method that you just learned. See what kind of cool stuff you came up with. Maybe you guys are coming up with a cool shot where it flies past the screen or something of the sort. So just feel free to render OpenGL movies and upload them in the forums. I'll see you guys next week when we get back into this and do some more cool stuff to this model and to this shot. Alright guys, take care. Bye-bye.